Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Book as in Books. This video is an update on my Read What You Own challenge. I say my, but it's not mine. It was created by the evil Criminali, who decided it was a good idea not to buy books just before Christmas and to invite other people to do the same thing just before Christmas in November. So it's a challenge where well, Ollie's not the only host. It was his idea, but other people followed. So now the hosts of that challenge are also Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads, MJ from Reading This Life, and Crystal from Fiber Artsy. And the original goal was to read 100 of your own books before you buy another one. Now, 100 books, that's an entire year of reading for some people. It's 2 years of reading for others. It's 3 or 4 years of reading for many more. It could be 10 years of reading for some others. And not everyone has 100 unread books on their shelves. So the idea is that you set a number of books that you want to read before you acquire other books. Because consumerism is an issue on BookTube. A lot of people have book hauls after book hauls after book hauls, and here's 30 books and 40 books and 50 books. And at the end of the year, when you count the books that these person have read, it's like 50. So they have every year dozens of books that just keep adding up on their shelves and not being read. So what's the point of having so many books unread on your shelves? A few, it's nice, but too many, what's the point? So the Read What You Own challenge is for that. It's just to check a little bit your consumerism and just to invite you to look at what you already have before going to see elsewhere. And I decided to embark on it. I decided to take the sort of lowest level available of 25. That is the bronze level. And more than that, I used the cop-out. Instead of counting books, I counted pages. Because in life, there's book and book. There's a book can be about 100 pages or a book can be 1,000 pages. And of course, it doesn't take the same amount of time to read the 100-page book and the 1,000-page books. So the hosts have decided that one book is worth 250 pages. So you can count a number of pages or you can count a number of books. So I decided to read 25 books, either in books or in pages, whichever came first. And I made a little graphics, not a graphic, a little table of the books that I read for that challenge. And that's the result. So on this side, I listed the number of pages, and they were, if I remember correctly, 25 squares per line. So at the end of the 25 lines, I was having, so each square was 10 pages. There were 25 squares, so 250 pages per line. And at the end of it, it was 6,250 pages. And I reached that in 19 books. There were only 3 books that I read that were under 250 pages, and all the other were above. There was even one at 616 pages, so that one was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I'm happy I made it through. So I have succeeded in my 25 Read What You Own 25 book challenge. It was difficult. So I finished about mid-March, not mid-March, good grief, mid-December. And what did I do right away? I bought a book and I read it. This one is the latest in the Palace of Rogue series by Julianne Long. It's a romance, obviously. And as soon as I bought it, I read it. And I thought that was a healthy way of buying a book. You buy it, you read it. It makes sense. So I decided that for 2025, I'm not going to go on a hard no buy. That's too difficult. I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to continue in a way the Read What You Own challenge, but with somewhat loose rules. I'm not going to set a fixed number of books that I want to read without buying any books. The idea is that I want to continue to shop my shelves because I had fun doing that. For example, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I don't know if I would have picked it up had I not been limited or had I not looked so much at the books I already have. Somewhat I can't say I had forgotten that I had that book, but in my mind it was never really an option of something I could read next. For some reason, it sort of was well away in my mind. Oh yeah, not that. And for some reason I said, no, it's time to read that one. And I just picked it up. So there was definitely something positive in the Read What You Want challenge, but it was difficult. I really like to buy books, and I love bookstores, and not setting foot in a bookstore for 2-3 months. It's a long time. It was not fun. That part was not fun. So I decided that I would be allowed to buy books, but I would prioritize the books that I have. So the way that I'm going to calculate it in 2025 is that I'm going to go for streaks. I don't care if it's 10 books or 8 books or 12 books. I'm just going to try to go for streaks of reading the books that I own. And the way not to break the streak is obviously not to buy a book, but it's not quite that. I'm going to allow myself to buy books. So there are going to be 3 circumstances in which I'm going to be allowed to buy books. I'm allowed to buy a book without breaking the streak if I read it right away. I buy the book and I read it. I don't go to another book. I don't go to a library book. I don't go to anything else but the book that I just bought. I come back from the bookstore, and the book that I read next is this one. It's the one that I just bought from the bookstore. I can buy 2 at a time if I read the 2 consecutively. I'm allowed to do that. It doesn't break the streak, because the point is not to add to the unread books on my shelves. So if I buy it and I read it, it's not an unread book on my shelf. So that's the one exception. The second exception of books I can buy, it's books that I've already read. So for example, if I borrowed a book from the library and I really want to have it, and the library has the bad habit of getting rid of the books I really love, and it's a bad habit, they have to make space for the new books, so the books that are not really read, they take it away, or they have just 1 copy in the entire city when they used to have 1 per branch. Anyway, if I want to make sure that I'll be able to reread a book in 10 years or in 15 years, the way to ensure that is to get a copy, to get my own copy. So I'm allowed to buy books that I've already read from the library, or I'm allowed to buy a special edition of a book. For example, if I want to buy a fancy edition of Pride and Prejudice, I've already read it, and I know that I'm going to read the new fancy edition at some point, because I'm going to reread Pride and Prejudice for the rest of my life. So I'm allowed to buy these types of books. And the third exception is going to be when a book of a certain type is getting, when my inventory is getting low. For example, romance. This is my go-to genre when I feel a bit sad, when I feel a bit stressed, when I want a quick pick me up. Oh, this is going to be fun. I go to a romance. Now, it's nice to have a little bit of a selection, not to have just one sad little book, or to have none at all and having to go to the bookstore. It's nice to have a bit of reserve. So if I have, I don't know, let's say less than 5, I think that's reasonable. If I have less than 5 romance books left on my shelves unread, I'm allowed to go to the next library sale and buy a few. I don't know, last time I bought 8 or 10. I'm allowed to buy like a dozen, just to have a little something in reserve, because I read those like candy, and they're not going to stay there for years and years. And if they happen to stay there for years and years, I'll have no scruples just getting rid of it, because a romance that has been on my shelf for more than 2 years is probably not something I'm going to read. So I'll just get rid of it. And if I get it at the library sale, it's like $2 each. Again, it's not something that is heartbreaking to get rid of. So that's the other exception. I may also include mysteries in there, because I also like to have a few mysteries in reserve. It used to be my go-to genre before I rediscovered romance a couple of years ago. But I still like to read a few mysteries, and at the moment I have about that. I have about 5 or 6 on my shelves. So I can live with 5 or 6, but when it comes down to like having just 2 or 3, I may get 2 or 3 more just to replenish the reserve. So that's the third exception. And beyond that, I'm not going to buy books. It still leaves me quite a bit of room to buy books, but I'm going to prioritize reading what I own, because the thing I discovered when I shopped my own shelves was that I have good taste. I happen to buy books that interest me. So all the books I had were interesting. I was not looking at the books and saying, oh, not that, not that. I was thinking, oh, I want to read that and that and that. Oh, which one do I pick first? And that's something that I like. So I'm going to keep shopping my shelves, prioritize shopping my shelves in 2025. I'm not on a no-buy year. I'm not on a entirely book buying ban. It's just that I want to be more conscious when I buy books. 1 at a time and I read it, or 2 at a time and I read them. and reading and buying books that I know will be useful, will stay a long time on my shelves. And yeah, just being more conscious in general of my book buying habits. And it's not a question of money, because I can afford to buy books. It's not really an expensive hobby, particularly if I buy my books at the library book sale. They're really not expensive, like $2 or $3 each. But it's a question of room, of space. In the last few weeks, months, I've helped my parents empty their house, and it was a big house. There's still stuff in it. It's still not over yet, but whoever inherits whatever mess I leave behind, I don't want them to be stuck with a whole bunch of stuff that I never used. There's something like, there was a lot of that, like with my parents, we were discussing what we do with this particular object, and we had no one to give it to. My brother and I wouldn't really have a use for it, and sometimes my parents would say, oh, we barely use that, it's almost new. Then I don't want stuff that is almost new in my house. I want stuff that I have used, and that includes the books. So that's a bit the spirit in which I am going on this Read What You Want challenge in 2025. I'm not on a strict buying ban, and if it happens that I buy like 2 or 3 books and I read just 2 of them, let's say I buy 3 books at the same time, and I read just 2 of them, and the third one ends up on the shelf, then the streak is broken, but I'm just going to start a new one. I'm not going to beat myself up with it. I'm not going to go in front of you and just flagellate. Just you can imagine. I'm sure you know the image of we see that in Catholic rituals of people whipping themselves, lashing themselves, just to. I think it's flagellation. I think it's the same in English. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. If I happen to buy a few books, then so be it. I can live with it. But I want to be more conscious in general of what I buy. So that's it. That's my resolution for 2025. The Read What You Own challenge continues, but with so many caveats that it barely does. But it does. It doesn't, and it does at the same time. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!